Hello, lovelies, and welcome back to the MoonTime Munchies podcast. I'm your host, Morgan Daley, and today's episode is all about how to stop doubting yourself. But first, a little update. I am finally back regularly. Last week's episode was on the Cloud Productions YouTube channel on time, but was not on all the other platforms because I had to renew my subscription. And honestly, I feel like MoonTime Munchies is really the problem child of the things that I create, because even just today, I'm trying to record in between doing holiday stuff, and I'm leaving for an operation today, and just so many things, work, and I went to record and I had storage issues, so I had to delete a bunch of stuff, and then the mic was getting really staticky, and the amount of times I had to say testing 1 2 3 to try to figure out what the problem was, I lost count. So hopefully this sounds good. I just really love creating this podcast, so of course I do it no matter what. But especially because I'm really passionate about all of these topics and the ones that I have a massive list for the new year. So let's just jump on into this week's, which is how to stop doubting yourself. I feel like this is an issue for so many of us. I think I've talked many times in past episodes about the sort of insecurity I feel like our generation has with being a little bit more empathic, a little bit more self-sacrificing, just due to the nature of prior generations and how we, subconsciously learned we must behave to survive. So I kind of broke this down into a couple steps, and honestly, these are pretty old notes, so I might have been inspired from some of the lifestyle and wellness content I consume, but I honestly couldn't tell you from where. So it's probably like a hodgepodge of different people that I've learned from. So let's just jump into it. Also, it's 11/11, so make yourself a little wish there. So first, I would say challenge your defeated attitude. Almost everything that we feel, we experience, that we go in this like spiral of emotion to a place where it is truly our experience. I mentioned in the past episode that so many of us are so good at manifesting inadvertently, where we believe something strong enough that it reflects in our reality, and then we go, oh, it's proof, and then our ego's like, that's how it is. And it can be any other way. So challenging your defeated attitude, possibly believing that you can do that thing, that you are smart or talented or hardworking, or you are courageous or intelligent or beautiful, or whatever it is that you have this limiting belief on. First saying, is there a possible reality where I could have this thing, or I could be good at this thing, or I could be this person? Because as I've mentioned before, there's no coincidence in the things that light us up and the things that excite us, even if I really enunciated that, excite us. I remember talking to an old, like, kind of family work friend, and I had mentioned to her, she's a couple years older than me, and so I grew up kind of working this like family restaurant dynamic, and she was, in her early 20s, as many of us work in the service industry, in her early 20s, and I was still in high school. And we kind of became friends once I moved, and we kind of stayed in touch online. And I had mentioned to her that a family member of mine that we both worked with really admired her kindness and didn't even, assumed that she wasn't even genuine at first, which again, is a mark of their limiting beliefs. But they were like, how could you possibly be so nice and care so much about people? And He truly thought she was like faking it to begin with. And this is also a family member that makes comments about how he couldn't be the one, you know, in a restaurant dynamic, the front of the house people are much more like charismatic and deal with hangry people and, hi, how are you? How's your day? And he was like, I couldn't fake that all day. So, but she was genuinely this nice and genuinely was this person. And I was telling her, I remember hearing this, you know, growing up, and I was like, I really admire that. I want to be the person that people say that about, that people are like, wow, that person's so nice, or that person's so considerate, or that person really made me feel seen. And she was over the moon. She was so gracious. Thank you so much. But you only see that in me, and you only appreciate and value that so much in me because you already have it within yourself. And I think that that's kind of a key to doubting ourselves or limiting ourselves, is that our ego steps in the way. And they say like the comparison is the thief of joy, and so many people are saying that social media is, you know, such a bad thing because we're comparing ourselves to all these people. But if you curate your social media not just to be what's trendy and what everybody else is following, but the things that light you up, the things that excite you, that call to your specific spirit and your niche in this world, again, art is never finished. What you need to extend upon and contribute to, and the avenue that you belong in, then it becomes exciting to look at what other people do and not to compare yourself and see lack, or again attach that to the ego and say this lack then attaches to my worth. Well, if they have it and I don't, then I'm less than them. It's just you haven't experienced that yet. You haven't done that or created that or been that yet. But it's exciting you because there's a part of you that knows that that's part of who you are, part of your self-expression, part of your experience and journey. So when we see something in others that we want for ourselves, we don't need to be envious or jealous or devalue ourselves or have any sort of shame attachment to it. We can feel inspired. We could feel, wow, that's so cool that I noticed this beautiful thing about someone else, and that really makes me want to improve in this area of my life. And that doesn't make you any more or less deserving of love or attention or appreciation or, acceptance because you haven't done it yet. My next piece of advice is to welcome everything that comes when you set a new intention or a new goal. I actually put in quotes, "It's all good," which reminds me of GMM, honestly, with their like little "It's all good" branding stamp. If you know, you know. Actually, I think they have a card game of that now, which I really want to get. But honestly, I noticed that I have a running theme of chaos in my life, and for a long time I fought it, and I've mentioned I don't particularly like it. I actually advertised one of my first podcast episodes with a clip. The way I say I don't particularly like it sounds exactly like Rosalie from Twilight going, "I don't particularly like you," or whatever the line is. But I digress. Chaos has kind of been this like running theme that nothing has ever been like the same or stable or really reliable for me for a huge percentage of my life in a lot of different areas. And as much as I feel very like lost and disoriented and confused and even like losing sense of self at some points, I always love who I am on the other side, and I love this like evolution I go through. And it's kind of become this theme that I've mentioned this briefly before, but in science, in spirituality, in philosophy, in art, I use them to compare and contrast one another, and everything's like this puzzle piece to understanding this like infinite web of energies and relations throughout the cosmos. And I think I've found this really beautiful place. I actually mentioned this issue in my update this morning, filming the Divine Diaries, that I've found this balance of being okay with being wrong. I think that being an artist is inherently hypocritical, because anything that inspires passion enough to create about was obviously triggered by the polarity of that thing. And so I think that in my teaching myself in education as well as in spirituality, where so much of it is intuitive and you're trying to like logically decipher the meaning of feeling, a lot of times you're incorrect. Sometimes you're spot on and it's eerie and it's so cool. And sometimes that wrong answer leads you to a correct discovery, to where you're supposed to be. So I've gotten to this point where I know the direction I want to go. I know the things that feel good to me, and I allow for the possibility of all opportunities, all different avenues to get to that point, all things just conspiring in my favor. And if things go what I perceive to be wrong, or there's a mistake, or a problem arises, or something inconvenient happens, or I have to go one direction and learn something or do something challenging before I can do this fun thing, then all of that was meant to happen. And so I kind of, as much as it can get like really frustrating, where you think, oh, logistically, if I do A, B, C, and D, I'll get to E, and that will only happen in 6 months. And then like life has different plans, and it takes 8 months, but you learn this huge life lesson along the way. Like there's always, like your intention matters. You are as I've mentioned before, a reflected, refracted, piece of the universe that is unique in expression, and you are the universe experiencing itself. So you are meant to create and to manifest and to challenge and to learn and fail and try. And it's not always going to look beautiful. It's going to be messy and imperfect. But I think that that's the key to, one of the keys to not doubting yourself, is trusting that it's going to be a disaster at one point in the process of becoming. So let it, and let yourself learn from it. Let yourself be wrong. Let yourself try and then try again. My next recommendation is to always try your best. Now, I think that this can also be a little misconstrued, because people say if you do your best, nobody's going to ask more of you. And I've had unhealthy and misguided people not understand what my best is and still ask me for more. And I think, again, in this very like self-sacrificing mindset that I've seen a lot, not only in my own lives, that too, my own life, and you know, the lessons I'm learning and the healing, the unfolding I'm doing, but also in the lives of those I'm surrounded by, both through the content I consume and the friends and people my age that I encounter. I actually had a homework assignment from my therapist this week, or last week, about perfectionism and control, which I didn't think I experienced, because I'm very like external, and I'm introspective about what I've externally done and how I'm externally perceived. And again, I think that comes from a background of like gaslight and neglect and those kind of things. But to give you an example of kind of learning self-love and my own value and worth just this year, I've had interactions with my best friend where we've both been extraordinarily busy, and so we'll only get to FaceTime every couple of weeks. And there was one time where I was filming and I was like, I'm so sorry you don't have my undivided attention. And he's like, I'm just grateful to be spending your time and space with you. And it took me back, because I didn't value myself like that. I didn't realize that just me showing up is enough sometimes. And another situation we had was I was visiting family, and I was having a really hard day. So he was, gracious enough to call me as we were heading to bed, and this family member came into this room I was staying in and said something snotty, and I was like, I'm so sorry you had to experience something like that before you went to sleep. And he was like, I'm sorry you had to experience it. My apologies, I got interrupted in the middle of that story. But that too kind of took me back for a moment, because I didn't even acknowledge that that negative, snotty comment was something that was directed towards me. I experienced in person, in real time, and in my direction. And I realized that, like, my friend is like, oh my God, we had the power just cut. That's crazy. All the lights just flickered. But my friend is like one of the most like compassionate, validating, kind, intelligent individuals I've ever met. And so I pedestal him, and I'm like, please don't touch him. He's perfect. And obviously he's not. Nobody is. But we really value and respect our friends in the way that we should be treating ourselves, the amount of grace that we should treat ourselves with. And it was something I brought up in therapy this week, where I noticed that I kind of went on this whole anxiety, shame spiral for making a little mistake. And I was like, I keep forgetting the fact that when I sign up for a job, outside of the ones that I do for you guys, creating content and things like that, I am signing up to show up and do a task. That is all. And the amount of like emotional and mental energy that I just leave on the table, the amount of like myself that I sacrifice, that 110% that I give myself at jobs, that was what she was talking about in the perfection and control. And it's just honestly a trauma response, and this kind of trying to control the narrative, control how I'm being perceived and what I provide for others, again, because of this misguided sense of self-worth where it's externalized. So yes, at times you'll meet unhealthy people who ask you for more than your best, because they don't really understand how much you are leaving at the table. But you also aren't expected or aren't required to do that for others. You aren't expected to completely self-sacrifice on the behalf of others. In fact, it's unhealthy. The healthier approach, we've talked about unconditional love before on this podcast, but filling your own cup and overflowing into others. And I think that, again, a lot of us come from a more like narcissistic background. The previous generation, unfortunately, has a lot of those tendencies just because of their need of survival and needing to fend for themselves. But in that, it was always, what value are you bringing to me? Everything's tit for tat. Everything's this business exchange. And it seems so cold and sterile to us, but we also become so self-sacrificing if we didn't do all of these like emotionally fulfilling and these convenience and just all these random tasks and, again, self-sacrificing things for our parents who couldn't find that balance within themselves and within their own lives. Then we had no value to them. And that's obviously incredibly toxic. Because the power cut, we have this security system that always like beeps like crazy when it's reset from things like that. And it literally started beating the second I was done with that take. So I'm very grateful for that it didn't interrupt me or my chaotic train of thought. But getting back to my point here, when people don't know how to fill their own cup, they believe that everything they need is externalized, which is why people cling to a very self-sacrificing society of working jobs that don't fulfill them, having relationships that don't fulfill them, because there's this fear. This is all I've ever known. This is all I've ever seen. How do I know I can get something that feels right, that feels good? But the thing is, you're never going to if you don't try. You're never going to meet those people who love you for you if you're not showing up as you. You're never going to get that job that really excites you to wake up every morning if you don't apply for the job. When we are taught these things by a previous generation, not only are we taught how to healthfully or properly step into independence and adult life. But we're here picking up the pieces and filling in the cracks that people can't do for themselves. And that, again, leads to this kind of business exchange relationship, even when you're not in a business, even with friendship, even with family, where like it's I do for you, you do for me. And again, that there's nothing wrong with that. We still deserve love and people caring about us and knowing us and doing for us. But when you don't know yourself and you're not doing what you love, you're just asking for random things you need out of desperation. And you don't know yourself. You haven't been authentically yourself to surround yourself and attract people who would know you. And they're not seeing what would truly fulfill you, what would truly feel good. And so you're not getting those needs met. And there's just this kind of like desperation and lack mentality that keeps you stuck in life. So doing your best for me is taking every task one at a time, which really, really helps. Like you have your to-do list, you have your plan, you know that these times are designated for these things, and you focus on exactly what's in front of you. Like today, I wanted to touch up my nails. I already smudged them, but I had a lot of filming to do before I do a yoga session for someone, fill out paperwork for this new job, and then go get an operation. And my days are kind of that full and that back to back for the holidays and for work and for all of these things coming up. And so I was like, okay, I gotta do this, I gotta do that while I'm painting my nails. And I'm just like, my nails are wet and there's nothing else I can do at this moment. So just breathe and finish them. And of course I did end up smudging them because I was like, I gotta go do things now. But that kind of like reminding my like anxious brain of what's next, like, well, right now we're doing this and that's okay. That has been really helpful. And also being mindful of where I'm at, taking time to restore my energy, to nurture myself, to find what self-care actually looks like for me, what feels comforting and validating and like love to me, and also reflecting on, okay, how did I spend my time? Well, do I want to be a little bit more efficient? Do I want to do a little bit more? Or what about the quality of my work? Is there something I can improve on there? Or what is the priority of things that I need to do now? What should I focus on with this little interim of time that I have? And honestly, that to me is showing up and doing your best. And I used to have this phrase that I would say all the time, like there's no free time, because I wanted to live very intentionally. And that didn't mean that I neglected self-care, because I am somebody who, like, to this day sometimes, because I live very close to family that I had a lot of trauma around. And so if I like hear something, I'll turn off the TV because I have shame about self-care and rest and about like taking care of my well-being, making sure my cup is full. I still have those feelings and that reaction. Literally this morning, somebody was walking by and I was like anxious to put like my little vegan whipped cream on my berries and mocha for breakfast because I was like, this doesn't even sound healthy. And honestly, in this group of family I'm surrounded by at the moment, I feel like I make the healthiest dietary choices, but I still had like so much anxiety and shame around making choices for my well-being or something that made me feel good. And to be honest, we're in this premenstrual kind of phase right now, and I needed the whipped cream. This idea of quote unquote no free time, it's kind of a reminder to constantly be doing my best and to also be very introspective. And in each moment, yes, there are the things that, okay, I'm working from this time to this time, and that's going to be when my focus is on those things. And even within work, there's going to be times where I really need to focus on the task that I'm doing, sometimes where your mind wanders, like, you know, not everything's going to be perfectly planned out, but in the in-between, thinking, okay, well, here's my list of tasks. And also life doesn't need to be an endless to-do list. Sometimes on that priority list is I want to go to, like, I went to a brewery yoga thing with my friend last week, or I really want to go to this bookstore or this like breakfast with this friend. I have a list of new friends that I've met getting out there and going for a new job where I've met people my age and I want to hang out with them. And that's a priority as well. I'm also prioritizing consistency in cloud productions, in the Divine Diaries, in MoonTime Munchies, in Wellness Wednesdays, and all of those things where I want to show up for you guys consistently as well. And having that time of like ritual, like I've been doing new and full moon rituals. Today is Yule when I'm recording this, and having that time to myself where I give thanks, I reflect on my questions are, my go-tos are always what worked, what didn't, and what can I do differently? And setting intentions, setting goals, how much closer am I to where I want to be, and what can I tweak? And it's honestly just taking that time to care for yourself, your well-being. Again, I mentioned this like premenstrual phase. I was going to be more productive these last 2 days, but my body hurt and my brain was foggy, and I was like, I'm going to sit here and watch Netflix for 5 hours. And that's valid too. So no free time doesn't necessarily mean that my whole life has to be this hustle. I think I've talked many times about the downfall of hustle culture and how I strongly support it. But it's more of this intentional living where I reflect on when I need to care for myself and when I need to hold myself a little bit more accountable. My next bit of advice is the only way out is through. Now, I feel like this is something that we say a lot with like hard times or trauma or something like that. And it kind of, I guess, has this pessimistic connotation as, you know, this no free time little slogan could be very easily connected to the idea of hustle culture, which is not my intention. I think that it kind of makes it think like everything is or makes it sound like, not think like, makes it sound like everything is this kind of endless to-do list. But no, it's more so like if you prioritize the challenging things, you'll feel so good for having done this. And especially if you're working on things that you care about, and like everything that you love is going to have a challenging side to it. Like I love to dance, but choreographing or sitting there to memorize choreography, or the patience to stretch properly before you dance all the time, I don't always do all of those things. Or in acting, like I really love emotional acting in tone and rhythm and setting a scene, but when it comes to memorizing or thinking like the character or playing off of someone, I have to work a little harder. That's just where my brain is at. Or even in music, like I learned everything not through like theory and history and instruments and sheet music, but through how things sound and feel. And I learned very intuitively. And like, don't get me wrong, I went through a lot of professional classes as well, but I still learned and maneuvered about them how I operate. And so when it comes to sitting there and learning like a proper technique or learning an instrument or producing, like I can very easily write lyrics and find like a rhythm, a melody, even like a energetic kind of feeling for a song. But to sit there and produce the music for it, like that takes more effort for me. The same thing with these podcasts, the Divine Diaries. It's really fun to talk about what's on my mind, or to share with you guys, or have this vulnerable connection, or to film artsy, cute B-roll, but all of the editing, or sitting down when I don't have the time or don't have the discipline. So this idea of the only way out is through is really reminding yourself, okay, well, this really is important to me. I want to spend my time and my energy doing these things. How many times throughout this entire podcast show have I said lifetime and life source energy? This is how I want to spend it. And so some days it's not going to be all peaches and cream, and I'm going to have to do it anyway. So you also have this like wonderful like dopamine response after doing something that's more challenging. Another little line that you can say to yourself to motivate you is, I can do hard things. And eventually you'll believe that. Or even redefining what's difficult for you. It's like, this is so easy for me, this comes easily. And if you want to spend that time again with manifestation or the law of assumption, and sit there, visualize, feel it going successfully, walk yourself through the whole process, and then your brain's already done it. It's already created that pathway, and now all you have to do is follow it. So yeah, sometimes things are not going to be the most fun or the easiest, but if you are truly following your passion, sometimes the only way out is through, for at least this little moment of challenge. And I think that that's something that's important for a lot of artists to learn, because I love my brain. Like, I think that there's a good balance between like the logical and intellectual, as well as the creative and emotional. But when it comes to like my work, I'm definitely more of like a creative mind than learning like the business side of it. I much rather learn about like science than business. And there's still like, if I'm going to be a creator, there's still business that I have to learn. There's still things that I have to be held accountable for. This next tip I've kind of mentioned previously a little bit, but it's take care of yourself. I know that self-care is really something that a lot of us have had to take a lot of time to learn, because of, again, really cemented in several layers of the consciousness and several habitual behaviors that we didn't feel like we deserved anyone's care, never mind our own, especially our own, when our energy could be given to others. We're not going to appreciate the end result. We're not going to appreciate obtaining the goal if we do not enjoy the journey. In fact, we're most likely to fail the journey if we're miserable the whole way. And so applying these behaviors of rewarding yourself, appreciating yourself, checking in with yourself, treating yourself how you want others to be treating you, really learning what works for you, what makes you excited to work, what makes it easier for you to show up, what is comforting. For me, I really like making a warm beverage and setting a cozy scene and making this sort of like ambiance. And I think it also having that kind of like ritualistic behavior before important or taxing tasks really sets it up for your brain that like, this doesn't have to be hard or difficult. This is just gonna be like mentally or creatively consuming, and it's going to be a significant amount of time. And so like taking that time, I'm gonna go to the bathroom, I'm gonna get fresh water, I'm gonna get snacks, I'm gonna make this super cozy, and then maybe even setting a timer where this is where my intention's gonna be. Take away distractions. And if you're working on something that you truly care about, whether it's a degree in something that you actually want to be studying, or it's a creative project that you're so excited to share with the world, there is going to be work involved in the making of those things. My apologies, now my camera cut me off for a moment. But valuing, oh my god, wait, I have a foot cramp. Valuing yourself as the creator of these things. Like, I always like to think of all manifestations kind of like the birthing of a child, for example. First this concept, this idea, this elusive thing, this spirit, and then you go through this process of making it, on this journey of pregnancy, right? And For me, I like to think of, if I'm birthing these things into reality, these bits of consciousness that are entrusting me to be their vessel, to be their creator, then I'm going to respect and nurture myself in the time and energy I'm exerting to make these things exist. Last but certainly not least, but possibly certainly as cheesy of all of them, find something to believe in. That is so cheesy. But, you know, having a true like values system or a true motivation behind your inspiration is going to be that fuel when you don't want to keep going, that really motivates your creation or your project or your journey. Like, you know, if you're getting your doctorate because you just really want to help people, you want to save lives, that's going to be your motivating thing when you have a lot of debt, when you are up till 3 a.m. studying, when you are so exhausted, when you're not eating nutritious meals in college. Like, when all of these things are happening to you and it's just compounding, and even with your attention to yourself, your self-care, you are getting a little exhausted, you're getting pushed a little bit to your limit, and the idea of quitting lingers in your mind. You go back to, well, why? Why did I want to do this in the first place? Why does this matter to me? Why am I putting so much of myself into this? And if you have a strong enough why, you can truly accomplish anything. And I think that what's really important as well, that I think a lot of people don't talk about with the idea of setting a why, is it detaches this accomplishment of yours to yourself, to your self-identity and your ego. So, you know, a lot of us go after things because other people are going to think we're smart, other people are going to think we're successful, other people are going to think we're so accomplished. But you're not going to, wow, my timer, it said I had 11 bars now, so this is a very auspicious episode, I guess. But anyway, returning to my point, you know, those are the goals that fizzle out. Those are the New Year's resolutions with this time of year coming up that never stick. Those are the things that just aren't successful because you're doing them for a sense of external validation, and that's not fulfilling whatsoever. Like, if you think of like a workout regime, if you're doing it so that you fit like the ideal body standard, or that somebody in school thinks you look hot or something, then it's going to be really easy to fizzle out when that gets challenging. But if you do it because you want to see how flexible your body can get, you want to feel how good it feels to have that energy and to feel like in touch with your body, you want to feel healthy and empowered and strong throughout your day, you want this energy reserve throughout the day. If these are your whys, then they're going to be the things that sustain you when it gets challenging. So again, getting very, very clear on this also helps you understand like what goals you truly want. Because I mentioned before that inspiration can either be extremely motivating and like, wow, I see a bit of myself in that artist or in that Pinterest post or whatever it is, and you're like, that really resonates with me. There must be a reason for that. That must be something I'm supposed to live or experience or emulate. Or is it just like, well, they look really pretty in a way that I don't, and that makes me insecure, you know? Like, getting very clear on your why doesn't just help you sustain your motivation through difficult times, but it also weeds out those goals that really aren't for you, that aren't your soul calling you to what lights you up, but your ego telling you people will like this, and then you'll have that acceptance and you'll have that safety and that structure. That's your ego trying to keep you safe, and that's not what you really want. So those are my tips on how to doubt yourself a little bit less. Hopefully that helps you with your New Year's resolutions and your goals with this upcoming year. I'm about to set some of mine because, as I mentioned, today is Yule. So I'm going to do a little tradition, a little gratitude, but also, not tradition, ritual. I'm sure it will be a tradition, but a little ritual, giving some thanks for the year, being a little introspective about, as I mentioned before, what worked, what didn't, and what can I do differently, and kind of setting some New Year's goals and getting a little bit of a head start, a little bit of a plan. So as always, wait, no, my brain, I had a brain fart. What is it? As always, this has been my thoughts on some things. I'd love to hear your perspective. My name is Morgan Daley and I'm on most platforms. Be kind, be mindful, and have a good day on purpose.